cities with her partner Patrick and their 2 dogs, Otto and Mac. She graduated magna cum laude with a bachelor's in psychology from the University of St. Thomas and holds a master's in positive developmental psychology from Claremont Graduate University in California. Marin is triple certified as a life coach, a budget coach, and a yoga instructor. Wowza. She's been featured as a guest speaker on multiple podcasts and is the author of the book, Ready Enough. So please, let's welcome Marin to the stage.
Hello, happy Sunday. I'm happy to be here and happy to be back, actually. I was here last April. Was anyone here in April when I was here before? Yes. So nice to see a few familiar faces. And I'm, again, grateful to be here again and leading a discussion that some of you have maybe been a part of all month long and will continue to be, of this topic of can you hear me? And active listening, and what does that actually mean? Of course, you heard a wonderful introduction of a little bit of my background, but to bring into awareness of my biases and perspective of how I'm entering this conversation and how I'm excited to lead this topic of active listening, a little bit more context of my background and my perspective that I'm thinking about when I think of this topic of can you hear me? I have a master's degree in positive psychology. Does anyone know positive psychology? I feel like of all communities, this community might be one where a few people do. Positive psychology is the study of wellness and what qualifies a good and meaningful life. So unlike what we would refer to as traditional psychology, which is equally important, but often treats ailments once they arise and looks at how can we increase or improve mental health once maybe there are some mental health challenges. We're looking at what happens in communities and with individuals when things are going really well, or things like post-traumatic growth, where even something really challenging happens, but then somehow so much meaning is created out of this, or something super impactful for that individual, for the greater community. And that's all of positive psych. And unlike the name, which I think a lot of people associate positive psych, understandably, with just focusing on happiness and that joyous outward expression of joy, it's actually the study of how can we be with all of life. And so in today's discussion of are you listening, that's one of the big things I'm going to be centering us with, of how are we listening to all aspects of life, and how can we be in relationship to all of these different aspects, whether in our mind we might label them as hard or challenging or easy and exciting. How can we be with all of it within ourselves and with each other? I have one area that I've ventured into kind of unexpectedly through my work thus far in life. So I started with positive psych. I started coaching with those triple certifications and was helping mainly women, but all of my clients to make some sort of decision in their life. Sometimes that was a big relationship change, divorce, or entering a relationship, being a parent, and what does that do for their life? Or making other decisions like, should I move to Norway? Which one of my clients came to me and was like, I can't figure this out. For some reason I'm called there, I don't know. And there was this one thing that just kept reappearing, and that was money. And I have an analytical mind. I like spreadsheets, and so I'm just captivated by that topic. But it also was this really interesting space where whenever it would come up in conversation, it brought so much energy with it. Like any belief or fear or hope that this individual had, or the people I was speaking to at workshops had, in all realms of life, once we focused in on, okay, how can we fund this dream? Or, okay, what will this change in your life do from a financial perspective? It was like all of a sudden, so many doors were open all at once, and there was so much fear, but also so much excitement, but also so many questions and things that we want to keep hidden from maybe ourselves or from each other, or extra constraint. And it was fascinating to me that this one topic had so much within it. And on top of that, with any decision and really with any pursuit of listening to how can I live my best, most meaningful life, there's always some element of a financial conversation in that. And I found that for a lot of my clients and at a lot of my events, there wasn't the space to talk about finances through a wellness lens. There was the planning, there was the spreadsheets, there were the helpful advisors and professionals that could logistically ask that question, but not emotionally and psychologically. So that's why I also have this expertise, and I mention this not so much that it's going to be a large part of today's conversation, but if you do stay in touch or look at anything else I'm doing, largely it focuses on money right now, and helping individuals bring this concept of wellness and positive psychology, and how do you align your resources with what you value and what you aspire toward through budgets and the financial conversation as well, which is a really interesting place that I have landed since starting this research and since starting this application of wellness. Today, however, we're talking about listening and active listening and what are you listening to. And so even as I introduce myself this morning and give a little bit of that context, I notice that I listen and or share with you to listen the accolades and the titles of what makes me and what I'm bringing into conversations. And as I already alluded to a little bit, what I'm encouraging us all to do today in this conversation as we listen and we consider practices for how to listen from maybe a more holistic stance, to guidance to people, to ourselves, to not just consider these maybe more surface accolades, achievements, titles, but to think of all aspects of us, ourselves, and all aspects of each other as well. So a little bit more context for me, but I share this more so to have you consider yourself and the other part of this pie that maybe you haven't listened to or given as much voice to, and or our neighbors who are sitting next to each other. What are the other aspects of them that we haven't maybe considered as much, or as we listen, we can listen for as well? And so this is Patrick. This is who I'm getting married to in February, my fiance. I'm a dog mom. We mentioned Otto and Mac. I am a dancer, and again, especially in that financial conversation, but also in any conversation, as I talk about wellness and the pursuit of a good and meaningful life, the more I've unpacked my own background and culture and current place of where I am, the more I unpack the amount of privilege that I've had. And it's something that I continue to dig into and get a lot of support with, and feel a lot of responsibility for, that has brought guilt and shame and questions and excitement and dreams, in a way that the more I speak about it openly and share and then listen to others' responses, the more connection I actually find that I experience with others who say, yeah, me too. I've experienced the same, and I don't know where to talk about it. I don't know where to share or how to listen to that part of myself, even because it feels so silenced or uncertain. Or, wow, Marin, that's not my background at all. Tell me more about that, because this is my experience and what I've listened to or what I've had as a big piece of my life. So let's share that. So especially in a conversation of listening and exchanging information, I think these aspects of myself, but these aspects of you too, like what completely makes you as we're listening and we're thinking about active listening to ourselves and to each other. So with all of that context, bringing into today's topic of can you hear me? And when I asked that question, when I was first presented with this focus, I thought of a lot of offshoot questions as well. Pick your favorite on this screen. Maybe what are you listening to that's at volume 0, like you can hardly hear it? What are you listening to that's always there? It's very loud and it feels like almost the only thing you can listen to at times. Again, maybe this is within yourself. Maybe this is someone else, a family member that you're like, it's their voice, literally, or in my own mind, that just is always there, or a pressure or a dream or a fear that is easily heard or not easily heard. Why listen in the first place? We'll explore that with a few different perspectives today. What are you missing? Is there something that you just haven't thought to listen to? Or again, that idea of listening holistically with many different perspectives or many different aspects and nuances of ourselves and each other. Is there something we haven't considered to listen to that upon listening, there's something to be gained or a change that we might even make from that understanding that we gain? So I've organized kind of all of these questions that circled my mind. We could talk about this probably for hours, but today into 3 main parts. So the first being the decision you need to make, or in other words, as we introduce activities and practices for us to be better listeners to ourselves and to each other, all of that can feel pretty lofty and sometimes overwhelming if there isn't a place to come home to and to ground these practices. So today, as I introduce especially some of my favorite coaching practices for active listening, I'm going to first prime us all to think of one thing that we want to listen for, one reason that we want to practice the art of listening and the art of being heard. So that's how we'll start today, before then going into the single best coaching tool I have and I use almost in every conversation because it's that good in terms of listening and hearing at a more holistic and deeper level. And then we'll round out today with meaning of why would we continue to involve ourselves in these practices and in this sometimes courageous pursuit of hearing things that maybe we haven't heard before, guidance maybe that feels like it's a challenge to us, or an inspiration that involves some action on our part. So grounding at the end from this conversation today, whatever you glean from this, what will you take to walk out the door and why will you take it with you? And that's also rooted in positive psych, that when we have a why, when we have a reason, we're that much more likely to pursue and to make a change in our life. So let's get started with the decision that you need to make. I want you to think of today what you might be listening for. Is there something in your life that feels like it's a question, maybe an exact crossroads that you're at, something specific, like you're entering or in retirement and asking, what do I do in this season of my life? Or maybe there's a relationship, a friendship that you're like, just something has felt uneasy about this, and there's something I kind of want to listen for here that is already maybe even being heard with a part of you, but you haven't fully unpacked that. A few more guiding questions will come up in a few minutes here of thinking about this decision, but I want to introduce maybe a meta example or meta metaphor of active listening through some different crossroads and decisions that I have tuned into and listened, that can be introduced or can be seen from multiple vantage points, and gets really interesting when we ourselves notice not only what are we listening for, but when we listen for that, what perspective are we listening from? That'll make far more sense in a second here. When I first started my coaching practice in 2018, I sat down with a business mentor, and I was just starting, so I was kind of getting a grasp of like what am I good at? What are my experiences guiding me toward? What can I actually help others with based on my experience and knowledge? And kind of gave a little bit of my whole life story to this individual. And they summarized, again, kind of my whole life story with this one sentence. They said, "Oh, so you're really good at quitting things." And I was taken aback, but surprisingly, I actually wasn't offended in that moment, because I was thinking about it and thinking about my story, and I thought, kind of. Like, yes, you're actually not totally wrong here. And then I took that thought and I went to my friends and family and colleagues, and I said, you'll never guess what this person said to me and kind of summarized my life. They said I'm good at quitting things. And their response was maybe even more surprising to me. They said, yeah, Marin, totally. You're absolutely good at quitting things. And in fact, that's something I've always admired about you. Like, if something isn't right for you, or if something isn't working, you're willing to change, and pretty quickly. And that's not common, is what their perspective. That's not common for people to do, is to be able to make those changes. There are downsides of being a good quitter as well. But there's also that pro that I thought, that's actually a skill that I can at least bring into more conversations and uncover myself. But I bring that context or that story of a perspective on different decisions, because you could look at, and someone did, look at some of my decisions in life and think of it from the lens of you're a good quitter. So through that lens, here's a life story of Marin. I danced my whole life till I was 18. It was my biggest passion. And so I started dancing at CU Boulder in Colorado as my major. That was going to be my career. I learned within the first semester that from a mental health perspective, that wasn't going to be good for me long term. And so I decided to quit the dance program, That's what led me to St. Thomas. And when I first came to St. Thomas, having thought I was going to be a dancer and now that was turned on its head, I thought, well, what else could I do? Maybe I'll follow in the footsteps of my father and be a physician. So I started on the pre-med track, and it didn't take more than one chemistry class for me to say, no, this isn't my passion. This isn't what I want to do long term. And so I quit pre-med and I found psychology, and I found positive psychology specifically, fell in love with that field, and applied to the one and only positive psychology PhD program in the United States, which is in California. My professor said I wouldn't get in. I did somehow. And so I got into this positive psychology PhD program, studied under Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the book Flow, and was honored to be there. And also, as I was there in this PhD research rigorous program, I thought I would love to be sharing this with people rather than staying in the research realm of this. I want to apply positive psychology, not just research it. And so I quit the PhD program and graduated with my master's instead of PhD. And this wasn't just professionally, my professional journey as well. Many years ago, as I shared, currently engaged to the wonderful Patrick. We're getting married in February, but I was actually engaged before as well. I almost got married to a man who I respect still, and we had a wonderful relationship, but there was something that just did not sit right as this is my life partner. There was something that was off there, and through lots of support and therapy and conversations with him, I decided to not get married to that individual and to quit that engagement in a sense. There are all these crossroads and decisions of quitting. That's one lens. It caught me by surprise when someone labeled it as such, but it kind of makes sense. But this same life story, and maybe for you, if you're thinking of your own life of when have I quit or changed course, there's also something else, at least for me, that was going on at each of these times. Another way I could tell that exact same story is that I was listening. I was listening to something that was really important at each of those crossroads. I still dance to this day, but when I was dancing and I was thinking of that as my career pathway and the pressures and expectations that came with that, I listened to that hard part of me that was saying, Marin, this is not good for you mentally. This is not, you're not, for whatever reason, like this isn't going to be okay for you long term. You have to make a change. That was really hard to hear, even harder to follow through with, and yet I knew I needed to and was able to tap in and trust enough to make a change, even if kind of by force of like, I really cannot do this. Same with the chemistry class, sitting in that lecture hall, and I distinctly remember I was a good student. I graduated magna cum laude eventually, sitting front row, but I was looking at that chemistry professor and thinking, I'd rather be speaking than learning about chemistry. Like, how do I get to that position? That's what originally led me to a PhD program, because I thought I could be a professor and speak all day long. Little did I think about the research that was also involved in that, which is important, but not for me. And so I was listening to that part of me in chemistry of there's something here, there's a different passion that's alive and well, that when I tap into it, I can hear and dare to follow. And the same for the other two. I chose applying, I chose coaching over the PhD research pathway for me. I chose the love that I had for myself and the self-worth that I was fostering and learning more about for myself with that relationship. And so for all of you, as you're thinking about a decision today, and here are the promised questions that I talked about earlier, thinking about something that might be unsettling for you or in question, or again, an explicit crossroads decision that you actually have in your life. What one thing today might you want to focus on and think about from these different perspectives, from a perspective of a decision that maybe even someone else would label as quitting or changing course in a drastic way, but also you could label as, what is something that's calling me to listen more, to listen to guidance, to listen to something that might elicit a change or might just elicit curiosity of learning something about myself or someone else. Maybe it's a conversation that you're kind of in the midst of with someone else. So I'll be quiet for a moment. I want you to use these guiding questions. What aren't you sure about? Where are you feeling frustrated? What choice still feels unsettled? What decision are you trying to make? And I encourage you to choose one decision, one thing that will center why you're listening today. What are you listening for? With a raise of hand, does everyone have something on their mind? Even a little something, decision crossroad? Yeah, nodding heads. Thank you for the hand raise. Great. And I clarify one decision, one thing to center the practices that I'll introduce today in terms of active listening for a few reasons. One, to reduce the overwhelm. I talked about that before. But two, because sometimes if we're listening especially to something or for a reason that we've maybe avoided before or that feels unsettled, there's a lot of uncertainty in that box that we're about to open. And sometimes what happens is we say we have this question, maybe someone is saying, I think maybe I'm not as fulfilled in my career as I thought I was, or there's something about it that feels like I might want to make a change. I don't know, I haven't fully opened the box yet. When we open it and we start to ask that question, listen to what's in there. If it's uncomfortable or if it gets scary, we can quickly say, oh, maybe it has more to do with my kids, and I want to stay at home with my kids more, which might be a part of it. But we divert from the original question at hand because maybe it's more comfortable, or maybe all of it is uncomfortable, so we're just hopping from one to the other. So again, to reduce overwhelm, just thinking of this one decision to center our practices today, but also to catch yourself if you're diverting from that question that you have or that exploration that you just called to mind now. Notice, are you doing this because it feels like it's really helpful in the pursuit of that question, or am I continuing to avoid listening to whatever is in that box that you called to mind? Okay, this goes into the practices now that we're going to apply to these things that we are listening to. I see the microphone ready to go. Does anyone want to share what they're listening for, the decision? Sometimes that's more personal than you would want to share in a big group, but is anyone open to share the decision or crossroads that you'll be applying these practices for today?
I have one.
Yeah?
I'm finding myself at a crossroads between the traditional corporate America job and what my heart is calling me to do, which is to mentor and to teach. And now that I've seen it, it's really hard to unsee it. So I struggle inside with building that bridge and making that decision and having faith and trust that everything is working out for my highest good. But it's easy to get sucked back in because it's comfortable, it's steady, it's reliable, and the other side is unknown, and that can be really scary for people. So sometimes I have pushed it away for many years because it was too overwhelming for me to think about. So I find myself in that space.
Thank you for sharing. And if you don't mind, I'll reference a little bit of that to even personalize what we're about to go into. And because I know that question or parallel questions to that are relatively common in this conversation. So I appreciate you sharing, and we'll use some of that as inspiration to actually apply the practices. Anyone else have one that you'd be open to share? Let me bring this
microphone. I wanted to share mine because I feel like mine isn't necessarily a question. I feel like in my life, shit has quite literally hit the fan times 10, and everything I thought I knew is not real, and so I'm just completely at a lost crossroads. So for me, it's finding that question for what am I listening for in general, looking for that question to decide, because I have no decisions in my life that I can make right now because everything's unfortunately out of my control. So for me, it's finding that question, and that's why I came to this, because I figured maybe I can listen and open myself up. Because I think, you do put it so much on a question, but it's for me, how do I even get to that question in the first place? So that's where I am with it.
Thank you for sharing. That's a very unsettling season of life to be in. It makes me think of, and not to label what you went through, I don't know what it is, but as trauma, but one of the definitions of trauma in positive psych is anything that rocks your sense of meaning or your understanding of the world. And so again, not to assume that it was trauma involved. Okay. Yes. So this is going a little tangential, but relevant, and I think everyone can glean something from this, of it's an incredibly hard place to be, and there is no easy fix. But one of the interesting aspects of the research that I found helped me understand why that rock feeling feels so rocky. It feels like such, the phrase, my world is flipped on its head, like that just makes so much sense, is because the sense of meanings that we create and the way that we understand our world grounds us and allows us to stay centered even when something else, like a breakup or something, is really unsettling and changes our trajectory. As long as we still have a sense of, okay, but the world as a whole still kind of makes sense, or like I can still stand on what I knew about my family or about my identity. And one of the identifiers of trauma is that sense of meaning is at question. And so it makes sense of how you explain, or if anyone else is feeling similar, of like, I don't even know what question to ask because I don't even understand the world anymore. And one of the, back to that differentiator of post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic growth, not the only thing by any means, this is a little oversimplified, but post-traumatic growth, something that a lot of people see, a lot of the research sees in post-traumatic growth, is when a sense of meaning can be recreated. And sometimes it's a totally new sense of meaning or sense of purpose. And maybe it's even directly related to what rocked the meaning in the first place of, wow, okay, now I see this area of the world where I can help, or this community I can really serve because of this. And now this sense of meaning makes sense, and maybe makes even more sense. There's even more fire and energy behind that. Or it can, I mean, it can look like a lot of different things. But maybe if the question doesn't come, or I mean, maybe the question or what you're listening for is, what is a question I can ask? That's a beautiful place to start. Or like, what's a sense of meaning that I can stand on, or what's one tidbit that still makes sense, or what's something new that now makes sense that I can stand on. So if anyone has any parallel experiences there where you're like, I don't even know what question to ask, those are some different directions to take it as well. And again, I really appreciate you sharing that. Anyone else? Third individual want to share? Crossroads decision, the focus of listening? Mm-hmm.
Hi, my crossroads is very similar to Kim's. You know, I'm in the corporate world, and I don't really like it, and I'd like to do something else. And I just went to Arizona. I went to Sedona and tried to check out the vortexes and try to get some kind of answer as to where I should be looking and what I should be looking for. And so that's my crossroads right now. Very similar to this. Just, you know, it's an oppressive economic system, and I'd like to work to change that. But, you know, I gotta pay the bills too.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And that's an interesting, you're at an interesting place right now asking that question, because it sounds like you just went almost on a voyage to listen and to hear things. And maybe you heard a lot and now it's time to digest, or maybe you absorbed a lot, but maybe haven't yet heard what was there. And now there's the opportunity to like think and hear, what did I hear there? Like, what are some of the things that I can reflect with to help with this decision or crossroads or insights? So thank you all for sharing. And again, for everyone else, come back to yours. What is yours as we go into these exercises? In the second part, I'm going to introduce these exercises in two different ways. One way of how can we hear and actively listen to ourself, and then the other is how can we hear and actively listen to our surroundings and maybe to other people, especially or specifically. So I like to paint this picture of artists around in a circle. Has anyone been a part of an artist circle where there's like a sculpture or maybe even a human in the center and everyone is painting or sculpting around? You've been a part of one? Amazing. You've been a part of one? No, okay. Yes, amazing. So I've never been a part of one, so maybe you guys can even provide more insight. But that's what I think of when I think of this single best coaching practice. And why I think of that is because if you imagine, whether you've been in one or you can just imagine it in your mind, this circle of artists all around one singular object. And for today, I'll use the metaphor of one singular truth, one singular event or question or decision. And if you were to walk around that circle, you would notice that on each canvas, there's a very different image. Not only because each artist is different, but also because each vantage point is really different. So if I were to imagine, for instance, a sculpture in the center where there's bright blue on one side and on the opposite side there's red. What can sometimes happen when we go to listen is we say, that is blue, and another person says, that is red, and then we just yell back and forth, it's blue, it's red, it's blue, it's red. And we're technically listening, and technically both are right, and both are maybe being heard, but there's not actually more clarity on maybe more curiosity of why is this so different, or how could this be so different, or tell me more about what you see, because I'm so surprised that you're saying it's red when I very clearly believe that it's blue. Same if you were to imagine, I don't know, a sculpture of I think of like the Greek goddess sculptures, if they were painting that of like the back of a body versus the front or the face, or just the different shapes that are present and how they can be the same truth, or they can all be accurate and yet so different. And this happens in our own mind, and this happens with each other. We'll start in our own mind. These different parts of ourselves that are saying, I want to leave my corporate job, for instance, is one part. There's this clarity. There's something that we're hearing there of there's a desire that I have, or maybe step it aside and introduce another perspective. I actually am so burnt out where I'm at. Like, I'm tired. So it's less about the desire of leaving, and it's more about just the exhaustion of being where you're at or not liking where you're at. Maybe there's another perspective, another artist in this circle that's saying, but how the heck are we going to pay the bills? This is the only way we've ever paid the bills. I don't see another way. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling scared. I'm here to keep us safe. Like, this is all I care about. This is my picture. I'm showing you my picture. And then there's infinite others around in this circle. And what happens if we don't have this single best coaching tool is that we have all of those voices in our head all at the same time, all of those values, all of those desires, all of those fears, and they're just playing all at the same time, or one is really loud, or maybe a few are really loud, and we forget that there are even any other to consider. So what this practice is asking yourself, what artists are in my circle? What perspectives am I bringing into this inner dialogue? And what am I hearing? Am I hearing one that's really loud? Am I hearing just the fear or just the pure optimism, and I'm just like going for it and forgetting about any of the other artists in my circle? Am I hearing voices that might not even be mine? Maybe it's my father's voice saying, Premed, 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 and that's all I'm hearing, and it's really loud. Or maybe it's a passerby on the street who just made a comment of what I looked like that day, like, oh, you look tired. And then it's like, oh, shoot, how am I looking? Maybe I do look tired. And that's just the voice that's in your head. And so to make this even a little bit more tangible, not only can we think about what artists are we listening to and how are we listening to them and who's loud and who's quiet and how can we play with those dials and consider each of them. I like to take it one step further. And who has seen Inside Out? Yes. Super cute movie. These little cute characters are in the main character's mind to portray the different emotions. And what I love about this, and this is exactly the coaching tool that I think is the single best, is it takes each of those artists, each of those voices, each of those thoughts, each of those values, those fears, those dreams that we have, and it actually creates a whole character of that. And what that does is allows us to separate the voices instead of it being this jumbled, chaotic, overwhelming mess. Then it's, oh, that's my fear speaking, and maybe even naming that part of you. Oh, that's my dreams, like that's the dancer speaking. She's this artist and she just loves expressing herself and she's really loud right now. Or like she has this thing to say, or yeah, here's my analyst speaking. They're looking at the budget, they're looking at the bills, and they have something to say. And like I can tell, that's all they know. They don't know any of these other characters. So what I encourage you to do right now is think of, as you have this decision, the loudest character that has historically, thus far, been the one playing in your mind. Was it a fear? Is it a seed that's been planted by someone else and it's just keeps growing and keeps consuming your thoughts whenever you think about this decision? Maybe it's the dream or the thing you're excited about that just won't stop talking about it. And then whatever that loudest voice is, see if there's a name that comes to mind. Sometimes my clients take inspiration from movies or from even individuals in their life where they're like, oh, that's for sure my old boss. Like she's either maybe it is her voice, or I think of my old boss when I think of this character because they're strong or they're very forward in this way that reminds me of her. So come up with a name. And then maybe even dress up that character. Like, what are they wearing? What activities do they like? What's their favorite topic of conversation? What do they never want to talk about? What do they avoid at all costs? What do they value? That's one of my favorite questions to ask with this coaching tool. What does this part of me value? And sometimes that value comes forth as fear, like I feel maybe their value is safety, and so they constantly remind you of how unsafe that decision is. But once we can get to, oh, they value safety, then it helps us to come back to, okay, how can I have a conversation and hear this part of me that allows me to remember safety? And maybe I'm not gonna have her in the driver's seat, but I can consider that and maybe even speak directly to that of like, I know it feels unsafe, but these are the things I'm keeping in place to consider safety as I make this change or as I think about even this question. This practice you can apply to any of the artists. So right now what I just led you through was what's the loudest one, to help identify that, differentiate it from the noise so that you can kind of see it almost from an outside view and get to know it. But you can also say, what's the artist that I haven't given the microphone to yet or in a long time? What do they have to say about this? Am I hearing them? How could I actively listen to that part of me? What is my favorite way of doing it? What is the fire hydrant saying? Pick a totally random object, and that gets you out of your mind and says, the fire hydrant wants us to have a backup plan. It's beyond safety. It's more like the planner. That's like, tell me more about like each step of the way so that I can prepare if things go haywire, even though we hope that we never have to use this fire hydrant. So there's multiple different ways to access the perspectives that are in your head, whether it's the loudest, the quietest, who haven't I heard, what voice isn't mine, or getting out of your head for a second to see, oh, I didn't even know that was a perspective I was holding on to, but there it is. And how interesting to give voice to that and to hear that a little bit more. How we use this similar practice when we're thinking about other people. So it gets layered, as I was thinking about, wow, it could be very layered and very complex of there's us, ourselves, and the artists within us, all of those characters within our own mind. But then there's that group that's also sitting in an artist chair amongst our community, or maybe our family, which each of them have their own chair. And then there's our community that then could sit in one artist chair with our greater state or country or world, or other communities that we're interacting with. In each of those, whatever layer you're at, you can always use this same practice of what is this other person saying or sharing, or which of these people are speaking really loudly, whether they actually are or whether it's just to me. Like out of everyone in the room, I always turn back to the comment this person made. That's who reigns as like the superior thought whenever I leave a discussion. I never really have considered that this person saying that the object is red could actually be accurate. I've always dismissed that. Maybe I come back to this artist circle metaphor and think, I wonder if I leaned in, whether in a direct conversation with them or even just in my own understanding of the thought, and say, what if that was actually true? What if they actually had a really valid point that I haven't considered yet? And how could I hear and listen to that from this empathetic or at least curious place? So again, you can use this within yourself. You can also use it amongst others, whether that's individuals or whether that's the way you interpret individuals and their voices and what they have to say, or even other communities or other groups as well. The same questions you can say with other individuals of who are you listening to the most, who are you silencing, who haven't you heard yet. And then one last piece in terms of when we have active conversations with other humans, because sometimes that can get a little bit fiery, especially if we're in a question that feels already intimidating or has a lot of energy with us. This is from the research on nonviolent communication. And I love this model. I, in fact, just used it on Friday with a conversation I had with my parents. The psychology nerd I am, I literally typed out an outline and was like, okay, what is the shared pool of meaning? That's the first question I asked myself. So what this means is there's their perspective, there's your perspective, whoever you're talking to, either literally or in your mind. And then there's always something that is the same. Even for someone you think is totally on the opposite side of an issue, there's something that you can come up with that is this shared pool of meaning. So the example with my parents, I was scared to bring up this conversation with them. They were a little bit like, why is our daughter bringing up this maybe hard conversation that we've kind of avoided? And before going into it, I thought, what's really at play here is I just really want us to have a positive, healthy relationship. And I would assume pretty confidently that they want a really positive, healthy relationship with me too. That's a shared pool of meaning. So even if this topic could feel tense or have very different perspectives, there was always this place to kind of come home to, whether it's me filtering a little bit of, okay, is me sharing this with them helpful to strengthen the relationship, or maybe it's not essential right now to strengthen the relationship and to come back to a healthy relationship. And same with them. I quite literally told them, my shared pool of meaning that I have for this conversation is just for us to have a healthy relationship. And that's why I'm actually approaching this hard conversation. And that helped them to also put down their guards a little bit and be like, oh, okay, it's not that she's just wanting to fight or like wanting to bring up something challenging. There's a purpose there. So thinking of that when we have conversations with others has been really helpful for me, for a lot of my clients, and might be helpful for you if you are about to enter a place where you are hearing someone or you're wanting to be heard by someone at a level or in a dialogue that might feel a little bit complicated or even scary or uncertain. This leads us to the very last part of today. You deserve to be heard. Why? Again, all that we've talked about today, why take any of this outside when you leave these doors? Why listen? Nothing changes if nothing changes, is a quote I've heard before. Maybe you've heard it as well. I don't mean this as a threat. I just mean this as a reminder that we all have different ways that we have historically listened to ourselves and to each other. And that's led us to the place that we're at. And we can continue down that path. That's 100% a choice. But if you're wanting to hear this decision that you brought to mind at the beginning today in a new way, or you're feeling like you aren't quite grasping it yet, to make a change is required to experience a change, any sort of change. And I encourage you as you go forth and you leave these doors to consider making that change from a place of self-compassion. I can geek out about this with more time than we have today. But Kirsten Neff does a lot of great research in positive psych on what that actually means. So just some things to keep in mind as we're considering whether or not we want to make a change or as we're actually making that change to listen in a new way. She has these 3 components: mindfulness versus over-identification, self-kindness versus self-judgment, and common humanity versus isolation. That middle one is probably what you automatically think of when you think of self-compassion, being kind to yourself instead of judging. Same with that circle of artists, whether it's your own in your mind or other people. How can I approach this with maybe a little bit more kindness as opposed to judgment? Mindfulness as opposed to over-identification just means, can I remember that there's even a circle here instead of just this one canvas in front of me? Can I remember that there's multiple perspectives to consider? And then maybe my favorite, the common humanity element versus isolation. This is to remember that although we each live very unique and individual lives, there's actually a lot more that connects us than that divides us. And the more we can remember, other people have asked scary questions. Maybe other people have asked this exact question or navigated this exact crossroads before. Even that thought can calm our nervous system and can help us to be in a place where we can hear deeply as opposed to have our resistance up. And so I encourage you as you go forth and you think of your why or the nugget that you're going to bring from this conversation out into the world to do it from this place of kindness, of mindfulness, and of remembering that you're not alone in asking these questions and in listening to even sometimes hard truths or hard realizations that you have. I found this quote before I wrote my book many years ago. It still inspires me and also scares me. The thing you are most afraid to write that. And today in a conversation on being heard and hearing others, I can flip it as well and think, the thing you're most afraid to say that. The thing you're most afraid to hear that. And not always, we don't always want to put ourselves in a place of fear and a place of being in high stress. But sometimes if there's something especially that feels like it's calling us, but we're avoiding it, or feels scary, but it keeps kind of popping its head up, listen to that a little bit more. Hear that character, hear that perspective a little bit more maybe than you have in the past. That rounds out today. We covered a lot in a little bit of time. But as a recap of the journey we went on, there's a decision you're thinking about that you've chose to think about. And we have now some practices to think about all the different things that we are hearing within ourselves and all the different things we are hearing from others and the conversations that can happen between all of those perspectives. And then for you, this is a little bit of soul work for you to do. What is your why for choosing, and I encourage, one thing from today to actually take out and apply into your actual life to continue forward with beyond this room and beyond this hour that we have together. Last time I brought more books because last time I was here, I didn't have enough. I bring this as, and this is just pay what you can or take whatever you want. I really mean this as a gift, as a way to continue with this. Again, walking out of this room, having something to continue with. A lot of this book talks about, of course, it's centered on decision making, but how do you make those decisions from a centered place, from an authentic place? In other words, how can you listen to these aspects of yourself? And so whether it's this or whether it's some other way that you're going to continue forth with this work, I just encourage you to pick something that can be tangible, that you can bring forth as a reminder of what we talked about today. And last but not least, and this we'll circle back to at the end because we're about to conclude here with all the other wonderful things that this space provides, is that sometimes when you want to be heard, it requires someone else, whether that's a sounding board to just share for 30 minutes on this is what's been going on and I just need a space to talk about it. Or sometimes you do need a little bit of expertise or guidance in terms of bringing out the characters, like the fire hydrant example of, I just haven't heard this voice before, I don't even know where to start, and wanting some support there. So I'm offering everyone in this room free 30 minutes of my time to go beyond this conversation as well. And all I ask is just a little feedback to help make speaking events like this that much better. Maybe my next time that I come in to have a topic or to have some more perspectives on what you guys really appreciate about these events. So forget this for a second because we're about to close out, but at the end of today, feel free to use your phone, give that feedback, and then anyone who does has more time with me on a one-on-one basis to be heard at maybe an even deeper level than today. And with that, we'll conclude. Thank you very much.
What a wonderful reminder, too, with listening, especially to the thoughts that we have when we come to a place of decision-making, that sometimes the fears that we have inside are these thoughts that we just kind of make up. Like, are they even real sometimes? But listening to them and then asking, where are these coming from? You know, the fears of not being enough or not doing it right or not knowing how to move forward. Those are all beliefs that we have in the form of thoughts that keep us in that crossroad, keep us stuck and unmotivated. And so it was a great reminder to really listen to that and ask yourself, is that true? You know, am I not good enough? Am I not worthy enough? Am I not able to do this? And maybe take that opportunity to tell yourself a different story. You know, it's easily changed too if you really want to align your life with a life that you desire to have. So thank you. So now's our chance, your chance, to partner with Lake Harriet Spiritual Community and support our amazing community. Your donations help us bring in transformational speakers like Marin and host life-changing workshops and events. Plus, word on the street is that every donation comes with a bonus of good karma, and I wouldn't want you to lose out on any of that. So Gary's just going to play us a little music, and our friend John will be around with our basket to collect any donations of appreciation that you have. Thank you.
I should have danced more. Left those things on the shelves at the store. I should have danced more. Spun around like a matador. I should have danced more. What on earth is this body for? I should have danced more. Giving myself to this beat I adore. I should have laughed, I should have laughed between the tears that fell on the floor. I should have flown, I should have flown. I should have danced more. I should have danced more. I should have loved more. Stop trying to even the score. I should have loved more. Shown you what was at the core. I should have loved more. Kept every oath I swore. I should have loved more. It was worth all the pain that I bore. I should have laughed, I should have laughed between the tears that fell on the floor. I should have flown, I should have flown.
Now, if you will, join me in a blessing of this offering. You can repeat after me out loud or to yourself. God's perfect love, flowing through me, blesses and multiplies all that I give, all that I receive, and all that I am. So it is. Thank you. And now Marin will lead us in a closing circle. So if we'd all like to gather up maybe 3 rows back and just make a circle here in front for some closing words.
Yes. So we'll conclude today with one of my favorite meditations that goes right along with hearing and listening. So go ahead and close your eyes if you're comfortable, otherwise just a low gaze in front of you. And we're going to hear 3 different things as we close. Start by hearing something far off. Maybe it's a sound beyond this room or in this room. Maybe it's a voice or wisdom that's just coming to you that feels like it's coming from far off. Take a moment to hear what that far off thing is saying or sounds like. The second thing we'll listen for is something that's a little bit closer and maybe even attached to the hands that we have gathered around this circle. Hear a feeling, an emotion, maybe some wisdom from the people that are here in this community. And lastly, bringing it all the way home to you, hear something really close in your heart, in your mind, in your soul, in your spirit. What is something that's wanting to be heard, that can be heard right now, that's very close to you? And know that this grounding, this technique is always available for you to listen far out, a little closer, and then right at your heart, right at your soul, to answer questions or to just come back to who you are. And with that, we'll ground and end today with gratitude for everyone in this room. Thank you very much for showing up, for being open, and for listening.